ChatGPT and GenAI tools have hit the mainstream. The chatter was everywhere, by almost everyone. We feel the discussion has been more philosophical than practical. We know enterprise technologists are using real AI to create efficiencies that result in real business outcomes. So, we created a show to talk to real practitioners about real-world active projects that are leveraging this exciting new technical advantage. Welcome to LiveAI.
We are back for more LiveAI, the show that brings real-life enterprise AI use cases to the people. With me today is Jason Johnson, IT strategist at Sweetwater, a company committed to giving music makers the ultimate shopping experience. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, we're so glad that you can make some time for us today. You know, this is a big episode for me. You know, Jason, you were a judge for our CIO Outlier Award, which is part of our Evolve Leadership Technology Conference, and which is a huge deal. I know you were also, nominated one year. Quite frankly, after touring with you at Sweetwater, I don't know how you could not have won that thing in a landslide. Very impressed with you and your operation. And another big reason, I am a customer of Sweetwater, and the degree that you and your organization maniacally think about how technology can be used to improve the shopping experience for a musician is just out of this world. I mean, I literally had chills touring the facility with you, thinking about all the ways you think about the human connection. And I think this is really interesting getting into your AI use case today, because for a company who thinks through every detail in how you're impacting the human-to-human connection, how do you think about AI and to solve big use cases, but not disrupt what makes you special, which is that human-to-human connection? And I think you've got a use case that you wanted to talk to us about today.
Yeah, we've got several different use cases we're working through, and even one kind of failed project we started on. But I think at the highest level, like the way I view AI is a booster pack for people, not a replacement for people. I really, really think that AI's job, and frankly, I'll tell you, like when I see AI art or AI music, like some of it's cool, but I get super frustrated. I'm like, why are we having the computer do something that humans should be doing when we can have the computer do all sorts of things that humans don't have to do or don't want to do? I don't think we can make AI, help harvest corn, but I'm sure, there's going to be tractor manufacturers out there injecting it in their products and making it easier and faster.
Last year I talked a little bit about on stage at our last Evolve conference around, robots writing the poetry and all the music and all the art was not the future I had envisioned.
That's not the AI I want by any means. And, I've been talking a lot to our teams and internally as we think about it, like AI is a booster pack for our humans to make them smarter, faster, stronger. Sweetwater is a high volume business. We're making tens of thousands of calls a day and interacting and having millions of customer interactions a day. And that's something where humans just can't reasonably scale to that level. And so I think that booster pack is necessary. And that's what we're going for. And I think beyond that, the other thing too, and I've heard this somewhere, is like, and I think you and I spoke about this before, it's like when they invented the tractor, you didn't just like plow your 1 acre field with your brand new tractor now and, clock out at 10 a.m. and go, congratulations, I got this great new tool, right? You went and found 200 acres and you said, I'm going to plow 200 acres now because I can. And so for me, AI is about empowering and making the Sweetwater sales engineer and the Sweetwater employee more experts and making that more context aware and more personalized, but then also saying, man, what a great tool to extend our reach and be able to actually complete more work and plow more fields, if you will, to meet musicians wherever they are around the world as quickly as we can. And so those are like the two key pillars that are driving every single thing around AI at Sweetwater.
Yeah, I think the last time you and I talked, we were having breakfast, and you were talking to our team about how Sweetwater is looking to put people in Iron Man suits, which is a really cool way to think about that, of like supercharging a human. There's a Tony Stark is inside there. There's still a human, but putting them inside an Iron Man suit to make them have superpowers. And I thought that was a really interesting angle on it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we say, internally here. And I think there's a layer of it too, with the maturity of the technology right now. It's super cool and people are drawing lines between things and doing all sorts of awesome stuff. But it's, like any great IT technology, it's not perfectly mature. And I think that by keeping the human in the iron suit with some level of control there, we can quickly filter out things that don't make sense or quickly make, that last mile connection there. In a way that allows Sweetwater to hold, our brand recognition and our expertise in our industry.
So diving a little bit into this use case then, from what I understand, and you and I may have touched on this a little bit, but I think the way that you would describe this is that you're creating some kind of digital assistant to go help your staff scale. Could you just give us a little more detail of like, what does that mean and how are you guys thinking about this?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was we said, what if we just threw as much data as we had, structured or unstructured, at a model and said, let's build a chatbot to help people. Well, let me fast forward you to the end and maybe help someone out. That doesn't work. I would call that a failed project. It gave us all sorts of interesting questions or interesting answers and gave us a lot more questions to ask, but it wasn't it wasn't the marketing line dream that everybody's seeing around AI. So we said, okay, let's break that down. And we found like 3 different groups, and we have a couple different projects running right now where the one I'm probably most excited about is an assistant for our tech support team. And we have about 50,000 active SKUs, and we have hundreds of thousands of SKUs that we support. But that tech support team is really challenged with dealing with make, model of all these products we support, and a lot of what they do is look into manuals, search the internet, and really dig in and try to find information so that they can understand what the customer is experiencing and what's going on. And I think I'm most excited about feeding that data into it and creating, an assistant bot, if you will, that can help really speed up the context time that it takes the tech support agent to jump into that conversation and go, okay, I'm caught up with you. I'm sure most people watching this call have been a troubleshooter at some point. Anybody in IT probably has. And like, any great troubleshooting conversation, as the person supporting, you're kind of trying to accelerate up to what the other person is saying. They've been down a journey a little bit before they've reached out for help.
Sure.
And so my thought is, if I can help use this booster pack to accelerate up and go and reduce the amount of time that it takes the agent to really get in the customer's head and go, okay, I understand what equipment you're talking about. I understand what model and version you're talking about. I understand what you're trying to do with it. Now I can really create a surface area where the real conversation can start from there. And that will not only create an operational efficiency for me internally and the opportunity to plow more acres, if you will, but also create a better experience for the customer, because there's only one thing that every human wants universally, and that's for whatever problem they have to be solved faster than it has ever been solved, right?
Yeah.
And so that's just a positive customer experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, second only to this problem never occurred to begin with, but I don't think
That's
we're
right.
in that kind of perfect world yet.
Technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you have a very human-centric way that you at Sweetwater think about how these support structures should work, and that you're talking to a real person. Obviously we don't. The things that at least make me crazy, I'm assuming makes everybody crazy, is that you have to get something up to speed, an assistant or an IVR or a person, and then you're transferred and you're starting all over again, and you're trying to get that person up to speed and what's going on. And I think thinking about supercharging how that process works, just to even understand the context to enter into the conversation, is tremendous. But then you talk about all the products that you sell, all the manuals, all the trouble tickets that you probably have had, over time, any Slack conversations or whatever tool you use internally to go have, discussions. Is it your intention to go take all that information then and then supercharge their ability to go help on the fly and get up to speed on whatever product that happens to be? Or how are you thinking about tiering your human support system and supercharging them in ways and layers that creates, the ultimate outcome that you're looking for?
Yeah, so I think we already have category specialties within that tech support group. And so a lot of it is some routing layers based off of signals that we think. So I think that would, I would call that AI. It's not generative AI, which is obviously where the entire industry is, but, looking at some predictive modeling in that realm to go, how do I kind of stack the deck in my favor the most by trying to match the right person with the right customer with the right product skill set on the front end using hard data. And then from there, what can I gain from phone data that's happened in the past? What context can I get from phone data? What context can I get from the customer? Might have been on one of our knowledge bases, surfing articles, and blend all that back together to really give, a dashboard or information flow back to the agent to really get the context of that conversation started, in a way that is engaging and not laborious. I don't know that I'm personally, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but I'm not super bullish right now on, AI generated phone bots. I'm the type of person I want to just talk to somebody right away. And so I'm trying to kind of build this experience along the way as you're getting to your agent, which in our world, we have we have little to no hold times. And so that creates a problem or a challenge set right within itself.
Sure.
But I'm not really interested in like where some other companies have gone, where it's like, hey, I'm going to let you talk to the agent on the phone, and we're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and then I'm going to get you to the person. I'm thinking about these two processes in parallel, so that when you land with your agent, they have as much context as I can humanly give them.
No, I think that's smart. I think when people really think about developing, 7-star experiences, something just beyond, and I think that Sweetwater does, is you want that. How do you make me feel, right? Is a service is something you do. Hospitality is how you make somebody feel. And to do this, the best way for a consumer is, look, a service could be like I talk to a bot, and maybe I get there, maybe I don't. But how you make me feel in the middle of that process, I don't think we're necessarily there yet. I do think the days of, what you're building to go help supercharge your humans are the baby steps that we're taking towards a future where we do hyper-personalize, understand you so well that you probably we understand you probably better than you understand yourself, and we can tailor that support experience in a way to where it becomes so mature that your own employees are saying, like, I don't have to do much anymore. Like, this thing is actually doing almost everything for me. And then we know that we're almost on the breakthrough of where you could still maintain, how do we make you feel extraordinary throughout the support process or the sales process? And you had no idea that most of it, technology, when it feels like it's magic, like it just works, it just happens and you feel delighted, like that's where magic happens. And anytime we have to see like, blue screens or like click 5 times here, or, the frustration sets in, like, cool, like you pulled that off with technology, but like I sure didn't feel awesome doing that.
Yeah. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. Like, the first person who ever paired a device with their phone using NFC instead of the Bluetooth Find Me screen was like, wow, right? This is great. You just really added incremental value to my life through a really positive experience. And I think the thing I would argue is that I don't want to take the humans out of those conversations and automate them away. I want to make it so that the human isn't getting frustrated looking for documentation, dealing with a slow website page load, that we can tee them up so that all they have to do is focus on, how do I make this person feel? How do I engage in a better relationship with them and bond with them because the busy work's over? I think when that happens, you really get the 7-star, experience, because then it's just two people talking. Right. And the problem kind of fades to the background. I will contradict that a little bit. I won't say the name, but I did call a business the other day, and they had an AI driven chatbot, and it actually solved my problem right away that I needed. And I was actually kind of I had that weird, like, oh, wow, I didn't have, but it also told me it was like, you can use the AI chatbot or you can wait on hold for 40 minutes. And so then when I got it solved, I guess the value add there was I got it fast. But it was a relatively simple problem. But that was kind of impressive. So, I don't know that we're as far away as maybe it might seem.
You've got conversely where, you've got rental car places where they've understood that, we don't always want to talk to a person. And if I can self-serve and just go get my car and not talk to anybody, which I don't want, then, you can go and have that route too. So maybe it gives you a little more optionality of, tailoring the support experience to those. But beyond all things, I think, the thinking of like how you're supercharging and for scale and speed and efficiency. I mean, the worst thing possible is being a musician, deciding you're going to be artistic and having the window of time to go do so, and your gear's not working correctly, or you can't get the outcome you're looking for out of it, and then having to spend an hour figuring that out instead of being creative. And so, how do we help with that experience?
And I think it's really interesting. Like, we're in a unique industry. I'm sure there's other industries like this, but we're in a unique industry where that changes, right? Like, I would imagine, and I'm just making this up, but I would imagine that, lots of people rent cars for lots of various reasons. Very few people probably rent cars to tow a boat or rent a car to do an oddball task. And you're a guitar player, Tony. There's sometimes you sit down and you're like, man, I want to go sound like Jimi Hendrix. And the next time you sit down, you go, I want to sound like John Mayer. And the next time you sit down. And so just because you're a guitar player on the surface doesn't mean that you don't have these N+ journeys that you're entering into underneath, that our job is to try to help understand where you're going and enable and empower you to get there. And that is a somewhat of a moving target, depending on whether you're playing at church or at home, or for your neighbor at a band, or you're trying to decide if your equipment even is capable of doing what you want to do, or what you got to pack onto it. And I think that's for me, the expanding value bubble that I want to make sure that every time we get the precious opportunity to speak with someone on the phone, because it is that these days, that we get the opportunity to really focus on that part of it and understanding where you're going for your, musical dreams, and less about the nuts and bolts of exactly what gear you have, where you're going, or where you've been in the past. And so I think that's where AI starts to get super, super interesting.
Yeah. Well, transitioning a little bit outside of the philosophical and into, like the technical dirt, I would love to hear, you mentioned earlier that there was a use case that you learned a lot from because of the failings. Mm-hmm. And, we're always telling everybody to, fail fast, learn fast, applaud everyone who's experimenting early and taking their lumps and trying to figure out, what is really the right way to approach this problem. Can you describe a little more around what didn't work in experiments that you had run previously, what learnings you took from that, and then how you're applying that towards, making a difference, and just give us a glimpse, like maybe like one level deeper into like the technology and why the problems and the opportunity that you have in front of you exists.
Yeah, so I'm becoming more and more a fan of believing that like the future of AI is really stacked models, if you will. So probably using more predictive or one level of AI to determine, okay, what's the special niche that we're in, and then how do I send you to a model that is hyper trained around that niche, versus where we started, which was like, could we just have one model kind of be the end-all model that solves all the problems, which is a very, immature thing. And frankly, there was a part of us, the team that worked on it, that thought, well, let's just try the easiest thing and see how it goes, right? I mean, you got to start somewhere. So I think that was a big lesson in here. Underneath that, it's all data-driven, right? Data is the new currency of IT, and it's frankly always been the currency of business and everywhere else. But how will you structure that data, and how you train these models, how you format it going in, and how you really train it on the context angle of it, I think is the biggest lesson we learned. Because when we really stepped back and said, why did what we do fail? It was not enough specialty, and even conflicting information that we were passing the engine, around different things. You can make a guitar sound with a guitar. You can make a guitar sound with a MIDI keyboard, right? You can make a guitar sound with a WAV file. There's too much optionality in a very large generic data set that just caused us to get answers that we said, this isn't really, this is the worst Iron Man suit we ever built, right? it is not, it's actually weighing people down because they're looking at it going, huh? I would never say that. And so I think refining our use case, targeting it down to a very specific area of the business with a very specific what we believe ROI, and starting really, really small is definitely the path we should have gone. I think it's easy to go use ChatGPT or Google Gemini or insert your favorite AI and just kind of see it as, oh, well, it knows everything. So if I give it all the things I know, then it'll know all the things, right? And it just doesn't work like that,
sure.
At least in our experience.
So, and obviously in your case, you've got specialized piece of information, you also have specialized lingo that, only really a community understands and can use. And, I know one of the questions that's out there right now that we hear repeatedly is, we keep hearing about like training or fine tuning, or, you just need a RAG architecture. And it sounds like, in your guys' world, you throw a RAG architecture at just like a very broad set of use cases, and you end up having like nigh disaster and just like, hey, like cool experiments, like that was cute, but it didn't really solve for what we were looking for. Did you, I've got a chain of questions, but I'll start with the model itself. Did you find yourself in a situation where the generic models at least worked to understand your business, your language, the language of your business? Or were you finding yourself at a situation where, you needed to explore what fine tuning or even, training your own model would look like? And did that also lead you towards this path of like more specialized agents for different use cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could ask the model very generic questions, and if they were very close to what the data said, it would respond in a way that you would expect. And so it was just not deep enough. And I think that, when you hear others talk about these knobs about hallucinations and stuff like that, like I think what we have found, or what I believe, is that we need to get to those tighter use cases so we can actually turn up some of those knobs a little bit and say, no, it's okay to hallucinate a little bit. It's okay to draw two parallels between two things and say, what if these are connected? Those become really interesting things to experiment with.
And those hallucinations that are occurring, if you describe that to your musicians as well, they may actually applaud you for it.
Exactly.
All great music has been made with some kind of hallucinations.
I mean, you're a guitar player, but every time I see a guitar player like blow air into a tube that's like wired down a microphone stand to like make their guitar sound a certain way, I'm like, who invented that? Like what where did that idea come from?
Technically the air is blowing into your mouth from that tube, but I totally understand your point.
It's like where did this come from, right? And so I think that there are some areas where some of this gear does, I wouldn't say it's open architecture, but a lot of the gear chains in ways that are kind of unexpected. And I think that that's a really, really interesting area to go, no, that's very specific. And let's give it the right amount of data at that point, but then turn some of these knobs and see what happens and see what some of the results we are to spark the human to think differently. Because at the end of the day, you do have a lot of employees that are talking to a lot of people, and that creates bias within that, oh, I have this, I've done this before, I've seen it all, I've done some of that. And that's not the collaborative process that music is built through.
Yeah. How do you think about this other concept? We've been riffing on this thing we're calling digital corn syrup, but it's essentially, the hallucinations that are occurring or subpar answers that are being used amongst multiple agents, or in you documenting continuously and then adding to your corpus of knowledge so that the model is using this now, digital corn syrup in the system, and how it affects your results over time. You mentioned sometimes hallucinations could be a good thing. How do you guys think about, data quality, data management, and then, obviously you're in business. Many cases answers have to be accurate or could be like damaging to your brand. Like, how do you think about managing that piece of it?
I think that you have to create those feedback loops in the tool, and you have to let people kind of tell you, what's good and bad. And I think you have to be scrubbing that self-learning aspect of it and really kind of inspecting that. I think one really great use case that we have not started on is interesting is like a sales bot where you could actually call and talk to somebody on the phone, but that other person is actually an AI model that's trained based off of all the phone conversations that have happened to that date. So it's kind of a catch me if you can, sell me this pen type mode. But I think that you have to then really be very purposeful about sifting through that data and going, this is good conversations, this is bad conversations. We've been able to hone a lot of those skills in. One of our most successful predictive modeling AI projects was based around fraud prevention. And we learned that lesson not the hard way, but we learned that lesson quite over time. Like we used to have about a 30 to 35% fraud manual review process for fraud. And we said, man, we're sitting on all this data. We know what a good order looks like.
So
or actually,
Jason, just for the sake of our audience, by 30 to 35%, you're saying 30 to 35% of all your transactions required some kind of intervention by someone on the fraud team to review?
for human on the fraud team. So this is Tony. We know Tony, but he's shipping to a new address. What does that mean? Human gets involved and goes, okay, this looks like it. Look, his address is on file with this credit card company. It's not, or that's the same state he ordered from, or it's a hotel. Okay, that makes sense. And sometimes that could actually drag out the purchase process, because maybe it's like, oh, we want to call him real quick again and double check that this is okay. With our measure being chargebacks, right? So we use chargebacks from credit card companies as kind of the determination as to what's leaking through. And what we really found was you can't just tell the model what's bad. If you tell the model what's bad, everything's bad, right? You have to seed it with both good and bad, and you have to find that slider there. And in fact, not only do you have to seed it with what's good and bad, but you have to be willing to go experiment and say, I'm pretty sure this is bad, but I'm going to let it go ship anyways so that I can fully complete that feedback loop and go, yep, I was right. That was bad. The model said it was bad. I actually tested into it. And although it doesn't feel good to have anybody lose $30 on, some 6-pack of strings that went out the door, what feels worse is blocking an order that you think is fraud that's actually a good customer out there. And
Sure.
When we have done those studies, we have found that that's the unspoken killer in that world, is when when Tony's trying to order from his hotel room and he's thinking, man, I really just wish I could get a new guitar delivered to my hotel so I could take it home in an old guitar case and tell my wife that I've had it for 5 years and she doesn't ask any questions.
That would never happen. It happens like every day, right?
That is an important aspect of that. People live their lives and don't really think about it. So, I think finding that balance in the feedback and making sure that you are highly sensitive to what you're inputting into these machines and what they're learning themselves when we go over to generative AI is absolutely critical. And look, data governance is the core of all of this. It really is. And I forgot who it was, but one of the models was, generating Windows CD keys at one point. You just look at that and go, that's kind of cool. It's also super scary, right?
So I want to double click on that use case, because I think there's some interesting lessons there and just some updates, because you mentioned the fraud prevention use case. You've got 35% of your transactions require human intervention to look at it. I believe you guys were applying some machine learning techniques to that to go look at transactions across a variety of different inputs of data. And then I believe you guys have been able to bring that down. Is it single digit percentages or is it 1%? How many transactions now require human intervention?
3 to 4% on a daily basis. Yeah. So we were able to make a significant dent in that, in the labor that was required by that team to do it, which we actually didn't downscale that team at all. What we said was, we want you to then go be 3x faster on the 3% that we're still sending your way. Because for us, it was really about reducing the amount of time that it took for an order to process end to end through our building and getting it out the door, including making that fraud decision. There's still some outliers. Right now that team it's actually harder to get down to that 3%, because we are doing additional steps like sending text messages and calling and stuff like that. And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that's getting stopped really is fraud. And so it takes a long time to dispose that. But at the end of it, it doesn't really matter because it's not a real customer at the other end.
Sure.
So, but that's been a huge success for us.
And so you were able to keep that team the same size, but your business has scaled incredibly since that use case was identified.
Yeah, 100%. Yep. Yeah, we've scaled at least 20 to 30%, I would say, in total volume. So, yeah.
Yeah, really impressive. And I think some important lessons out of there is, Gen AI obviously is all the rage, but there are many use cases where, other AI techniques are actually the ones that you should be looking towards. Gen AI has its own strengths, but machine learning, deep learning, other types of techniques are still very much in demand and actually are probably the best solution for what it is you're trying to do. because they're much more precise in like how you can dial in the precision for, predictive or classification or, those kinds of things. You mentioned earlier around getting to specialized agents. And I think this is a really interesting discussion we're hearing more and more and more out in the fields, which is agents that are more specialized, doing specific tasks or leveraging generative technology to do, a very narrow thing, but then the chaining of these together or the pooling of these together into some kind of swarm to get the kinds of results you're looking for. It's not one big, massive AI tool that you're using, but the swarm of AI capabilities that are all beginning to work together that enrich exponentially, the things that we're trying to do. Could you go in a little more detail around how you're thinking about the specializations and maybe, either aspirations that you have around that or some challenges that you're already, looking to address that you're finding in that thinking?
Yeah, I think we're really in the beginning phases of training those specialized areas. But I think at the highest level, like I think about it like assembling a team of people, right? If I wanted to go build a house, I wouldn't just go find 20 general contractors and throw them in a room. I'd find a plumber and I'd find an electrician and I'd find a general contractor and a roofer and all this. And so I want you to think about your AI, team as having an overlap and understanding, the areas of these Venn diagrams that cross each other, but also having really genuine special skills in a specific area. And so, one really like pointed use case that we're not struggling with right now, but we're working through is, a Fender guitar is a Fender guitar, right? But guess what? There's lots of different variants and versions of it. It can have different pickups on it. It can have different strings on it. It can have all these different things around it. But oftentimes you just, it's my guitar, or it's a Fender guitar, or it's it's a particular pedal. Well, guess what? There's been 12 versions of that pedal over the last 10 years. Which one do you have? And are the manuals completely applicable to every single one? And so you start to talk about like windowing and how do I actually zoom in and go, okay, that's another model, or that's another lane that goes, I'm going to understand a particular nuance of a particular thing. And again, all that comes back to training data and feedback loops. But I think those are some of the challenges that are really ahead of us that we're seeing and going, how do we solve that? And how do we solve that with a level of accuracy that makes it a true Iron Man suit?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I'm really interested to see how those turn out. Obviously, like, I'll stay in communication so that we can revisit that at a later date, because the whole industry is changing every single week, and then new technology comes out and then it changes again. And finding where the areas where people are having success and where the trends are beginning to where we can go repeat and just learn all together, I think is incredibly important. So I really appreciate you sharing that piece with us today. When you think about the AI future for not just the industry, but maybe for your business in particular, if you were to peek out, let's say 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what difference do you think it has made, and what impact has it made towards, whom you hold most dear, which is your customers?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the tractor and the plow analogy. I really hope that we change the surface area we have with customers to many, many more diverse musicians, and we have the opportunity to meet and create those bonds and relationships with those people that are really, our prized possession, our customer. And so for me, it's all about accelerating and turning our 1 acre field into a 200 acre field so that we can just have that much more impact. I don't want to get all sappy on you, but I believe that more music, more arts in our world only benefits everyone from a mental health standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, just across the board. And so that's my personal goal, is how do we just up the number of interactions and the number of surface points we have with customers. And I believe that if we do that in a way that is very genuine, and if we do that in a way that is very servant minded, that the dollars and cents will just make it all true. So that's really where my head is pushing us, is more transaction surface area with the actual customers, or relationship surface area with our actual customers.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
Jason, is there any other topic that you wanted to cover today that maybe I didn't ask you already?
Yeah, I think I'm just curious mind. I know Trace3's is a big Microsoft shop. I'm assuming you have a CoPilot license. I have a CoPilot license also. I'm just curious, in the table stakes AI kind of Gen AI realm, like how has CoPilot changed your kind of day to day, or what do you think is the most exciting feature of the stuff that's kind of in production right now? I'm sure Microsoft still calls it beta, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beta. I mean, there are some clear ways I think it has changed my life for the better. And in many other ways, we're still trying to figure out, what that means for everybody. But I'll kind of take it on like a multi-step journey. I mean, one way for me, I travel a lot, or, I went on a vacation I was, international for a couple of weeks. You're either taking time away from your family to answer emails and get engaged, and you're not being present for your vacation, or you are saving all that up for when you get back, just to trusting your team's got it. And now you've got 2 weeks worth of stuff that you've got to get caught up on. Doing things that, seem like, well, yeah, that's not rocket science, but like nobody does these things, which is something as simple as, read every unread email that I have for the last 2 weeks or the last 10 days or whatever the time period it is, prioritize emails from my organization, and then tell me every single one that actually requires my attention. And then, order it in order of like, priority or level of urgency. And now instead of like, 2,000 emails for me to go through, and maybe some that, have already been solved by somebody else, I wind up with this, hyperlinked, version of, the emails, why it believes it requires my attention, a quick link to the email, or I can explore it in more depth. Now I get back and I spend 1 hour reviewing that as the priority list. And then usually by after that case, if anything else starts to bubble up in urgency, somebody's already reaching out to you saying like, hey, like, welcome back. And, could you take a look at this thing? But within 1 hour, I can knock out, 2 weeks worth of unanswered, questions that truly require my attention. And everything else is, just kind of like noise in the system. And that's just like a very obviously like tactical, simple, one person use case of how you might spend time. But our time is incredibly valuable. It's like, and a wasting of your time, can be like incredibly detrimental to how you think about how you want to spend the day, and where, who really needs your attention, and where do you want to spend those calories. So I'm finding we've got a community of interest around CoPilot where, people are showcasing the use cases and things that are really impacting them. Like that was one for me. I think that what we're really finding what the impact of CoPilot is going to be is that, getting into CoPilot Studio and the ability to take CoPilot capabilities in more like specialized ways, similar to how you were thinking about, the GPT applications that you guys are looking at, is where we see better advantage. Because if you take just like CoPilot in general, there's many like cute ways that you can gain, productivity out of that. If I take CoPilot Studio and I start to create a CoPilot based application that has other capabilities and the ability to draw in other APIs and integrations and stuff that I want to be able to pull in, now I can expose that to a team and, do something pretty phenomenal. I can go and reimagine an entire business case. And so we're actually going through right now, department by department, and looking at, what are the top problems, where are the top bottlenecks, and approaching it from an AI native perspective. Like, if this was an AI native company, how would we have built this process to begin with to go solve for these problems? And then are we using the right version of CoPilot to go solve for those problems? And that's actually where we're seeing like the biggest hang up and struggle outside of the data side, and we can get that in a second, is the misunderstanding of CoPilot and what its uses should be versus richer applications that you can build for your organization, leveraging CoPilot, but making them either organization-wide or functionally accessible, and then turning that into your workflow, which then can integrate into automations and everything else, so that it understands more your intention and like the lingo, and you start to be able to tune it. Like very similar to how you guys are thinking about, the specialized. But the data piece, obviously is a big one too, because the risk management, you go launch CoPilot or any similar tool that's like that, and then you try to just unleash organizational data on it, and all of a sudden you've got like payroll spreadsheets sitting out there, and not necessarily like even in the HR folders, which should be protected anyway, but somebody at one point had like emailed that or transferred it or saved a copy and then stuck it in their OneDrive, or put it wherever, and all of a sudden, like, it's accessible through the CoPilot, and you've got some major problems. So I think we as an industry are still looking at like the individual tools, and we've had multiple guests on the show like talk more and more around how they embrace that piece of their life. Honestly, I think there's no shortage of ways for us to think about using CoPilot for great use cases to go improve whatever productivity you need as an individual. But what we do have problems with is people forgetting that they can work in that mode of operation versus doing it the old way. And we have countless scenarios where it's like, well, I'm what's taking so long to go do this thing? And it's like, well, I got to do this, and this whole mile of tasks. And like, yeah, but you could just do that with your CoPilot, or you could just do that with, ChatGPT. And they're like, oh, I didn't even think about it. And yeah, you're right. And in 15 minutes they come back and they've got everything that you were looking for. And it's just getting into, I guess Evolve Think. We've got the gentleman who wrote Atomic Habits, speaking at Evolve this year, and similar kind of concept, those atomic habits. How do you build atomic habits even around things like CoPilot and ChatGPT, and what that turns into for you?
Yeah, that's great. My answer is much simpler. I've got a couple use cases that I just really love. Any corporate environment, I'm sure you get it. Somebody just forwards you an email with no context. I always try to push back on those, but it's been great. The summarize feature is just awesome. Summarize my email. I tell you what, you really want to scare yourself. Tell it to summarize your calendar and start asking it questions about how much time you're spending on certain events, or I did one the other day leading to some leadership training for some folks about how many words they're writing in emails, how often are you asking questions. It's an interesting outlook to now all of a sudden be able to mine this, frankly, what's probably one of the richest data sets that any executive sits on, which is their email box. And ask it, just ask it all these kind of generic questions. Like I said, the calendar one will scare you because you'll realize how much opportunity you have in optimizing your time, which, like you said, is your most precious asset, and you can never get it back. And so those have been, very kind of enlightening and fun to play with. Of course, templating stuff and having it pre-write stuff and, stuff like that is, again, hugely beneficial. But I think unlocking some of the data analytics side of it. We had a very large P&L spreadsheet that had a copy of every dollar we had spent in our P&L for our department and all the vendors. And tell me some interesting things about my P&L. Saved me hours of digging through line by line and looking and just going, oh, that's weird. We really didn't think about that, or we really weren't aware of this trend that's below, kind of an FP&A reporting KPI. But buried down in there with opportunity. I think that's, those are the accelerators that I think are super, super cool.
Yeah. And, I think it's useful for everyone to just keep in mind that, anytime a technology comes out, there's, too much hype that comes out. Like we expect much more than what it's really going to deliver day one. And then we probably aren't thinking well enough around what its long-term ramifications are. And those, it probably falls more in like that midterm, time horizon. Yeah. And I think we're still taking baby steps and, creating the foundations of what will become something pretty tremendous, and not to get lost in like, well, that was cute and I feel good about it, but I don't really have any hard metrics to go drive a result from it. And, I don't really know where this goes, next, because layering these capabilities and building an organization who starts to think this way and starts to operate this way, has significant dividends over time. Jason, as we, begin to close this out, any final words of advice you would have to other leaders out there as they're just thinking about their AI journey, and not just generative AI, but like, because you have AI, classic AI use cases, Gen AI use cases, but, words of advice.
Yeah, and maybe I would just say their technology journey, right? We're all on a technology journey, and I know you and I talked about this once long ago, but like, you said things falling on their promise, right? The first time we had a regional zone outage in a cloud provider, it was like, wait a minute, the cloud can actually go down. That's like, you have to zoom back on every piece of technology and realize that like we're not technologists, we're business partners. and we exist because of the business, and the business has needs, and the business has a desire to think differently and deliver more value to your customer. And you have to zoom in and come up with those use cases. I'll tell you, I sit on a lot of boards and I talk to a lot of people, and the number of people I hear saying, oh, we're implementing AI because the board told us, or we're implementing AI because we have to, because, if we don't. And it's like, what are you doing? What problem are you solving? What's your your value proposition back to the business? They go, I don't know, we're just going to figure it out. It's great to point CoPilot at a spreadsheet and say, tell me something, or have it summarize an email or a calendar. Like I said, that's cute, like you said. But there can be real value in it. But I think to really transform, we have to, as technologists, we have to deeply understand our business. We have to deeply understand what's driving and growing. And then we have to figure out how to weave technology in alongside that with a clear metric of how it's going to win, and be really honest with ourselves and saying, this is working or this isn't working. This is ready from a maturity standpoint, or it's not, and make those bets alongside with the business. Instead of sitting in the corner and trying to invent something or solve a problem, and then going and looking for, where I can inject it in the organization based off of what I've already built. You can see that, and I point to the cloud, like our technology people tend to do that over and over and over again. Like we tend to write programming languages over and over and over again. And I would just encourage everybody, it's being that partner alongside the business that I think really separates great technology folks from good or okay technology folks. And when you do that and you do it with the business, you get all the buy-in you need along the way. And I think when I talk to peers, the most, they're often frustrated because they have something cool and they brought everybody else in the business alongside them way too late in the game. And the frustration is that they want to act now and do now. And when you have that moment of enablement or transformation, or insert whatever buzzword you want into that, that's the moment in time where you need everybody else beside you going, we see the same thing. Let's go, kick some butt and take some names. And I think that I see a lot of people stumbling on that. So that's my encouragement to everybody else, is like, experiment, be willing to fail, but do it with your partners and do it around a use case that you really think is going to move mountains and change something. And when you do that, break it down into the smallest possible problem that you can and go solve that small problem, urgently to build that kind of snowball effect. And as far as I'm concerned, if you do that, people will carry you out on a chariot. So that's my parting words.
Alive on the chariot with chairs raining.
That's right. Yeah.
Want to make the distinction.
For sure.
Really wise words. Really appreciate you spending time with us today, Jason, and sharing your experiences, the passion. I can say after touring your business, the culture at Sweetwater really bleeds through into everything, and the way that you and your teams have embraced technology to make that come to life have been really inspiring. And just thanks again for spending, I know you're very busy, spending some time with us today. Have an amazing weekend, and great talking to you.
Yeah, same here. And thank you so much for being a musician, and thank you for being a customer. You guys are sometimes, you're the outlet for all of us. I've always said I just love that, a 1-year-old that barely knows how to stand when a great song comes on still wags their butt around and dances. And, music is so innately built into every single one of us at such a core level. I just really, really appreciate those that are out there driving that passion. And, if you can align right and, be a Sweetwater fan at the same time, then all the better.
Well, I see that guitar behind you. Next challenge. I know you got your pilot's license. Next challenge up, where a year from now we're going to come back and you and I are going to jam together.
Yeah, challenge accepted. Yeah.
You've been listening to LiveAI. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation. This episode is sponsored by Trace3. To learn more about why you should connect with them, about your enterprise practical AI use case, visit them at trace3.com or look for them on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.